Usher, on camera in 2026, defending a convicted man. 50 Cent saw it, and he came with footage. Here's how it got there. A man who lived inside Diddy's world at 13 years old, who said hell no to ever sending his own child there, who then allegedly handed a teenage Justin Bieber over to that same world, and who just told Forbes he has nothing negative to say about any of it. This is the story of what 50 Cent knows, what Usher isn't saying, and why the footage that just dropped changes everything. Let's get into it. The post that shook the culture. 50 Cent didn't just post about Usher, he came with footage. A direct, calculated attack. A screenshot of People magazine's coverage of Usher dropped onto Instagram on March 25, 2026, with a caption that implied Usher wasn't protecting Diddy, he was protecting himself, that whatever happened to him in that world was something he did not want the public to know about, that as a grown man now, certain things were off limits. It was crude, it was pointed, and it was clearly written by a man who had been waiting for exactly this kind of opening. Because this wasn't 50 Cent operating out of nowhere. This is a man who is right now executive producing a 4-part Netflix docu-series called Sean Combs, The Reckoning, built around never-before-seen footage of Diddy in the final days before his arrest. A man who has spent months digging, building, accumulating. A man who has made it his personal and professional mission to make sure that nobody in the industry gets to quietly look the other way while he is standing right there with a camera pointed at the truth. When 50 Cent points at someone, it is never random. And on March 25th, he pointed directly at Usher. That right there is the operating principle. Silence is endorsement. That is the argument 50 Cent has been making publicly, consistently for years. And the argument that gives every Instagram post, every caption, every piece of trolling a weight that goes beyond entertainment. He is not just clowning people, he is holding them accountable to a standard he set for himself the moment he decided to put his name on a Diddy documentary. And Usher walked straight into that standard when he opened his mouth. The post exploded across every platform within minutes. Thousands of likes, thousands of reposts, YouTube reaction videos stacking before most people had even finished reading the caption. X was on fire. Instagram Reels were splicing 50's post directly next to Usher's face. People who hadn't thought about Usher and Diddy in the same breath for years were suddenly thinking of nothing else. Outlets from Hot New Hip Hop to Complex to the Jasmine brand were all running it within the hour. The story had legs before the sun went down. So what exactly did Usher say that made 50 Cent come for him like this? He sat down with Forbes journalist Jabari Young for the publication's The Enterprise Zone series, a prestige business interview, the kind where moguls speak candidly about legacy, entrepreneurship, and the lessons that shape them. He was asked to give a one-word association for Sean Diddy Combs, a man currently sitting in federal prison. He did not hesitate. He said, legacy. And then, rather than leaving that single word to carry whatever meaning it would, he decided to elaborate. He decided to explain himself. And that is where things went sideways. He kept going, framing it around prosecution versus recognition, around the idea that greatness gets overlooked when scandal takes over the conversation, around the notion that a man can be more than the worst thing he has ever done. And then came the line that handed 50 Cent everything he needed. Understand what that means in context. Sean Combs is serving a 50-month sentence after being convicted in 2025 on 2 counts related to transportation for prostitution. His net worth has been cut from billionaire status down to an estimated $400 million, bleeding out daily against more than 50 civil lawsuits. Cassie Ventura's lawsuit alone described acts so graphic they were difficult to print in mainstream newspapers. Federal agents raided his properties simultaneously across Miami, Los Angeles, and New York in a single morning. The entire industry had made its choice: silence, distance, look away, and keep moving. Usher chose this moment to call it misrepresentation. Now, to be fair, and we are going to be fair even when the facts themselves are the most inconvenient things in the room, Usher was careful. He framed everything around his own personal experience, his own mentorship, never claiming to speak for victims or to deny what happened to other people. He acknowledged that no man is perfect. He was speaking, he said, to what he personally lived through, not to what anyone else experienced. There is a version of those comments that, extracted from context, reads as a man trying to separate the mentor he knew from the monster everyone else is describing. And that distinction matters. It matters to him, clearly, and it matters to this story. But it did not matter to the internet, and it did not matter to 50 Cent, a hard teacher. That is how Usher described the man currently incarcerated on federal charges. A hard teacher, and critics from Al B, short a podcast host to fans across every platform called it tone deaf. A profound misread of the room, a jarring act of loyalty at the exact moment when the people who had actually been harmed inside that world were still waiting for the culture to fully reckon with what had been done to them. The debate was immediate, and it was everywhere. But none of it landed the way 50 Cent's post did. Because 50 Cent's post was not just shade. It was not just trolling. It was a pointer. It was him looking directly at the camera and saying, "You already know what I'm talking about. Go look it up." And what they found when they looked is a decade-old Howard Stern interview. Words Usher spoke himself, long before any of this became the story it is now. Words that, sitting next to the Forbes interview, create a contradiction so stark, so uncomfortable, and so difficult to explain away that the culture has not stopped talking about it since. The camp. Nobody talks about here is something that gets buried every time this story resurfaces. And it should not be buried. It should be the very first thing anyone says when they hear Usher's name in the context of Sean Combs. Because while the internet was busy clipping Usher's 2026 Forbes comments and laying them next to 50 Cent's Instagram post, a different video, a much older video, was also making the rounds once again. A video in which Usher himself, sitting across from Howard Stern, described in his own words what it was like to be a 13-year-old child sent to live in the home of one of the most powerful and most controversial figures in the history of the music industry. Let that sink in for a moment. 13 years old, a child sent to live, not visit, not tour, not attend a party, but live for a full year inside the world of Puff Daddy. The arrangement had a name. L.A. Reid, co-founder of LaFace Records, Usher's label, orchestrated what was called Puffy Flavor Camp. That's not a phrase someone invented after the fact, or a description applied retroactively by critics. That was the actual name given to the program, Puffy Flavor Camp. A program in which a teenage boy was removed from his home environment and placed inside the daily life of Sean Combs, ostensibly to learn the music business, to absorb the culture, to emerge polished and prepared for the industry that awaited him. And what did that year look like? We don't have to speculate, we don't have to infer, because years later, sitting on one of the most famous talk show sets in America, Usher told Howard Stern exactly what it looked like. In his own words, on tape. Think about what it meant to be in Puff Daddy's world in the early 1990s in New York City. Bad Boy Records was in the process of becoming an unstoppable cultural machine. Biggie Smalls was walking those halls. Faith Evans, Jodeci, Mary J. Blige, Lil' Kim, Craig Mack. These were not just names on an album cover. They were actual people present in the actual physical space where a 13-year-old Usher was living. The music, the money, the energy, the lifestyle, all of it was crashing into this child's daily existence at once. Howard Stern, being Howard Stern, did not allow the conversation to stay comfortable. He pressed, he pushed, he wanted to know exactly what a teenager was witnessing inside that world. And Usher's answer, as measured and controlled as Usher clearly tried to make it, revealed more than he perhaps intended. He saw it. He was 13, and he saw it. What exactly he saw, he was reluctant to spell out in full. But when Howard pushed further, when he asked point blank whether anyone had approached the young Usher, whether anyone had done anything, Usher gave an answer that has haunted this entire saga ever since. I didn't say that. Pause on that, because those 4 words, I didn't say that, are not a denial. They are explicitly, deliberately, and carefully the opposite of a denial. Usher did not say that nothing happened. He said that he didn't say that nothing happened. That is a very specific, very lawyerly, very calculated distinction. And the way he said it, the pace of it, the weight in his voice. It is the kind of response that answers a question by raising 10 more. He continued. When Stern asked him to characterize what was happening around him, Usher did so in terms that were evocative without being accusatory. Very curious things. Things that he, as a child, could not fully understand or process. Things that apparently involved enough that he described Puffy's world as pretty wild. Things that left enough of an impression that decades later, when a man asked him if he would ever send his own child, his own son, to the equivalent of Puffy Flavor Camp, Usher did not pause. He did not hedge. He did not reach for nuance. Hell no. 2 words. Zero hesitation. The most honest 2 words Usher has ever said publicly about this subject. And yet, in March 2026, this same man sat in front of a Forbes camera and said he had nothing negative to say about Sean Combs, that his experience wasn't what the world saw, that Diddy had been misrepresented. How do you square those 2 statements? How do you look at hell no, I would never send my child there, and then look at I have nothing negative to say about the man who ran that place, and find coherence? Critics and commentators from Al B, short of podcast hosts across the internet, asked exactly this question in the days following the Forbes interview. And the answer, if there is one, lies not just in Usher's loyalty or his relationship with Diddy's mentorship. It lies in what happened next, in what Usher did not just with his own career, but with the career of a young Canadian kid named Justin Bieber. Because here is the part of this story that takes everything to an entirely different level. Because the conversation about Usher and Diddy did not stay confined to Usher and Diddy. It expanded. It expanded the moment Usher, who had himself been placed in Diddy's orbit as a teenager, became the man who discovered, managed, and mentored his own teenage protege. And it expanded further the moment that protege ended up spending time in Diddy's world as well. Usher discovered a 14-year-old Justin Bieber in 2008 to 2009, signing him through a joint venture with manager Scooter Braun. Usher became Bieber's mentor, his guardian in the industry, the person responsible for shaping this kid's early experiences in the music business, just as Diddy had once shaped Usher's own. And then, in November of 2009, a 15-year-old Justin Bieber appeared in a video titled 48 Hours with Diddy. In that video posted to Bieber's own YouTube channel, Diddy, a grown man in his 40s, showed the teenager his Lamborghini, promised him a car for his 16th birthday, promised him a mansion at 18, and casually mentioned on camera that whatever they had been doing, he couldn't really disclose, but that it was, quote, definitely a 15-year-old's dream. The video, which was publicly posted at the time, resurfaced with seismic force in 2024 following Diddy's federal indictment on sex trafficking and racketeering charges. And with it came a wave of questions. Questions about who knew what. Questions about who allowed what. Questions about exactly how a 15-year-old boy ended up in a room alone with Sean Combs, being promised cars and mansions on camera, while his mentor, the man responsible for him, was somewhere not in that room. Those questions have names attached to them now, and one of the loudest voices attaching names to those questions is not a journalist. It is not a federal prosecutor. It is a singer named Jaguar Wright. And what she has said publicly about the mechanics of how Bieber ended up in Diddy's world, specifically about the role Usher played in making it happen, is the most explosive part of this entire story. The Bieber bombshell and the verdict. The culture is delivering by now. You've heard the Forbes interview. You've heard the Howard Stern clip. You've seen 50 Cent's Instagram post. You understand the architecture of this story. A famous protege publicly defending his famous convict mentor. A rival mogul publicly and mercilessly clowning him for it. And a culture trying to figure out where the line between loyalty and complicity actually lives. But there is one more piece of this puzzle that hasn't been talked about nearly enough. One more allegation, and we want to be clear. It is an allegation. that reframes every single element of this story in a way that makes it impossible to look away. It comes from Jaguar Wright, and if you don't know who Jaguar Wright is, she is an American R&B singer who has spent years at the center of hip-hop's most contentious circles and who has in recent years become one of the most vocal and most controversial voices making direct allegations about what went on in Diddy's world. She does not hedge. She does not use diplomatic language. And in one particular video that circulated widely, she made a claim about Justin Bieber, Usher, and Diddy that, if true, is not just damning. It is devastating. Let's be precise about what is being alleged here. According to Jaguar Wright, Diddy had been attempting to access Justin Bieber for some period of time, and people around Bieber, his management team, the people whose literal job it was to protect him, were actively preventing that from happening. They were blocking Diddy's attempts. They recognized something in his behavior that concerned them enough to serve as a barrier between Diddy and the teenage boy in their care. And then, the allegation goes, Usher stepped in. Usher took over management of Bieber, and Usher, who had himself lived inside Diddy's world as a 13-year-old, who had seen the curious things, who would later say, hell no, to the idea of sending his own child to anything resembling that environment, allegedly granted Diddy 48 hours of access to Justin Bieber, temporary guardianship, 48 hours. The implications of that timeline are staggering. Other people had already said no. The people who were supposed to be protecting Bieber had looked at Diddy's interest in this teenager and made a decision, no. And the allegation is that Usher then became the person who opened the door that those people had specifically chosen to keep closed. And not just opened it, but obtained legal custody of Bieber first, and then handed him over. We must be responsible here. Jaguar Wright's claims are allegations. They have not been verified by a court of law. They have not been corroborated by Bieber himself. And crucially, in May of 2025, during Diddy's trial, Bieber's representative issued a formal statement that was both clear and measured. Although Justin is not among Sean Combs' victims, there are individuals who were genuinely harmed by him. Shifting focus away from this reality detracts from the justice these victims rightfully deserve. That statement does not confirm Jaguar Wright's allegations, but it does not categorically refute them either. What it confirms is that Bieber himself wanted the conversation to remain focused on the people who were genuinely and verifiably harmed, and that those people deserve the world's attention more than speculation about whether or not he personally was also harmed. What is documented, what is not speculation, what is on video, publicly posted, and publicly available, is the 48 Hours with Diddy video itself. The footage posted in November of 2009 to Bieber's YouTube channel showed a 40-year-old Diddy alongside the 15-year-old Bieber, promising cars and mansions, joking about getting some girls, and describing activities they had been engaged in as things that couldn't really be disclosed. That video existed then, it was public then, and the people responsible for Justin Bieber, including Usher, were aware of it. And now in March 2026 comes another layer, because on March 15th of this year, Usher and Bieber reportedly had a heated verbal exchange at Beyoncé and Jay-Z's exclusive Oscars after-party at Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles. Sources present described energy and anger from Usher's direction toward Bieber. It did not turn physical. One of Usher's friends later called reports of the incident an exaggeration. Usher has disputed the characterization, but the fact that an incident of some kind occurred, that these two men, in March 2026, in the middle of the Diddy scandal's ongoing fallout, came face to face in a room and something happened, is widely reported and not fully denied by anyone involved. 50 Cent, predictably and immediately, amplified the Oscars incident on Instagram. He posted images, made jokes, and tied the confrontation directly to the Diddy narrative, to the guardianship allegations, to all of it. And a culture that had watched him do this kind of thing for 2 decades understood immediately what he was doing. He was connecting dots, publicly and loudly, and inviting everyone else to connect them too. Which brings us back to 50 Cent's docuseries. Because this is not just a beef, This is not just an Instagram feud. 50 Cent's Sean Combs' The Reckoning, a 4-part docuseries airing on Netflix, contains never-before-seen footage of Diddy in the final days before his arrest. Footage obtained from a journalist who documented him during that period. The footage reportedly shows Diddy arguing with his legal team, obsessing over his public image, greeting fans in Harlem only to return to his car and say, on camera, that he felt dirty after touching people. It includes testimony from 2 actual jurors who sat through his trial and delivered the mixed verdict that sent shockwaves through the entertainment world. 50 Cent has described this project as his way of making sure that the silence of the industry could not be interpreted as endorsement. And in that single exchange, 50 Cent says more than most people have said in 2 years of coverage. He wasn't surprised, because he knew. Because those behaviors, whatever they were, whatever the footage shows, aligned with everything he already understood about who Sean Combs was. And that knowledge is what fuels every Instagram post, every troll, every sarcastic caption, every pointed joke at Usher's expense. Because from where 50 Cent is standing, and where millions of people watching this story unfold are also standing, Usher's choice to describe Diddy as legacy in the same breath as a convicted man serving federal time is not just a PR miscalculation. It is a statement of values. It is a declaration of where your loyalty lives when the cost of that loyalty finally becomes visible to the world. And the world, apparently, has opinions about that. Outlets from People to Rolling Stone to USA Today covered the backlash. Hot New Hip Hop and Complex documented 50 Cent's viral response in detail. The Jasmine Brand, TMZ, Variety, everyone had something to say. And as of right now, as of March 26, 2026, Usher has not responded publicly to any of it. He has not addressed 50 Cent's post. He has not addressed the Oscars incident. He has not addressed Jaguar rights allegations about Bieber. He has gone quiet, which is, for a man whose entire public image has been built on being warm and present and engaged with his audience, a very loud kind of silence. Here's what we know for certain when we zoom all the way out and look at the full picture. We know that Usher lived with Diddy as a 13-year-old and described witnessing things he could not fully process. We know that he said, in his own words, he would never send his own children to that environment. We know that he later became the mentor of a teenager who ended up spending documented time in Diddy's company under circumstances that other people had actively tried to prevent. We know that Diddy was convicted and is currently incarcerated, with more than 50 civil lawsuits still pending. We know that 50 Cent has dedicated a significant portion of his creative and business energy to making sure none of this disappears from public conversation. And we know that Usher, in the middle of all of this, chose to speak. And chose to speak in Diddy's defense. What we don't know, what no one outside of those rooms can claim to know with certainty, is exactly what Usher knew, when he knew it, and what his choices mean in the full context of everything we've learned. That's not a question this video can answer, but it is the question that 50 Cent, through a single Instagram post and a 4-part Netflix docuseries and years of public pressure, has made sure the entire world is now asking. And as long as Usher stays silent, that question is going to keep getting louder. If you've made it this far, subscribe, drop a comment, tell us where you stand on this. Because this story is not over, not even close.